Why do you think Louisa May Alcott condemns Meg in the chapter Meg Goes to Vanity Fair? It seems strange to criticize Meg for something that plays such a large part in Amy's arc, namely luxury and wealth. Keep in mind I am not criticizing Amy for this. I adore both sisters. This is an excellent question. Somebody actually left a really good note about this to the Little Women discussion group that I am part of. I will read it for you. I think it is interesting how Jo seems to be treated as the ultimate feminist icon, despite the fact that she doesn't seem to like other women too much. She loves her sisters and she wants independence, but she has very strong internalized misogyny that affects how she views other women. And it's interesting how this tends to get ignored, and I think it's great she grows out of this. Emily and we discuss this quite often in podcast, how Jo and Laurie, they insert ideas of toxic masculinity to one another when they are teenagers. They both have this idea how a man is supposed to behave like. So when Laurie is catfishing Meg, Jo has doctrined herself to sympathize Laurie instead of her sister. And Laurie was the one who sent those letters and was hurting Meg. So what Jo wants is the male privilege. But when she is pursuing that, she adopts ideas that actually make her more misogynistic, and Laurie as well. When he begins to chase her or harass her, in a way they created that situation already as kids, when there's this dynamic that Laurie can do whatever he wants. And Jo always forgives him because he was a boy, and Jo always had a habit to pamper Laurie. And when they grow, Jo can't no longer be like a boy because society doesn't approve. But she doesn't really want to be a boy anymore. And she begins to see how her own actions, which are influenced by that toxic masculinity, her actions, they begin to harm people around her and herself. Like losing the trip to Europe. That's a good example because she put herself above the ants and said that she was better than them and put herself above the feminine labor. She made fun of the female labor. I think the reason why Louisa May Alcott condemns Meg and Amy for wanting luxury in Little Women or the rich families, they are not happy families. The sense of purpose is seen more valuable than the number of fashionable clothes or luxury items. Meg is being pampered and she enjoys it, but she also feels conflicted by it because it contradicts with her personal values and the way she has been raised. She sees the luxury world of the Moffats, but then she also sees the poor immigrant families when she goes to help Mommy. There's nothing wrong with Meg wanting to fit into the world of the wealthy young woman, or Amy wanted to fit to the world of wealthy young woman. So maybe part of that resentment that Jo has more to do with her messed up ideology, which is at times very much colored by misogyny. I read how Louisa edited Little Women, and at one point she seems to have rewritten Amy's scenes, making her less flirtatious, and Jo is quick to criticize her sisters when they wish to fit to the wealthy society, and it makes one wonder what were Louisa May Alcott's views on femininity. And I believe her views were rather mixed, because when Louisa had extra money she actually liked to buy nice clothes to herself, and there are also diary markings that when she had a love interest to come by for a visit, she would pay much more attention to her appearance. There's a scene in the beginning of part 2 where the narrator says that Jo loved to hang out with Laurie because he opened the door to the world of young men. Jo doesn't want to flirt with these young men, she wants to be one of the guys. In the same chapter she is criticizing Amy for being flirty, and Laurie is being very flicky. First he is flirting with the young ladies when Jo says that she hates flirty girls. Laurie is like, I hate them too. That Laurie harassing Jo, it kind of becomes part of Jo's feminist growth. I've been reading quite a bit about how Louisa wrote about the times when she had been harassed sexually. Louisa was a very maternal person and she loved to hang out with the young boys. It's possible that some of them developed a crush on her because of the nurture that she gave them. That kind of happens between Jo and Laurie, and I started to wonder that what if you have a strong masculine trajectory and then your friend begins to show that they are interested in you and you are not interested in them, but then you can't really judge them because you yourself have that masculine trajectory, or boys will be boys mentality, which is very questionable these days. Therefore, Jo needs to rebuild her entire identity because Laurie breaks that old model of the ideal masculinity that Jo has had. There's a great scene where Friedrich comes to court Jo, and the narrator says that Jo forgot to compare him to Laurie, who used to be her model of masculinity. So Friedrich, he replaces the toxic masculinity, tender masculinity, and thanks to him and Joe's sisters, Joe becomes more empathic and more kinder person. When she starts the school, it is a school for boys because Joe loved boys. For the people who don't understand it, Louisa May Alcott loved boys, and I'm pretty sure that she had somewhat similar experiences in the way she adopted toxic masculine behavior patterns and then grew out of them. There's a great scene in Little Men where Joe's niece, Daisy, complains to Joe that boys don't take her to their games, so she wants a game of her own. And Joe thinks to herself that there are tons of boys in the house and the only girl is the most difficult to please. This is one of the things that has always made me question why people think that Joe was sort of born into this world to support women's rights, when she was often criticizing her own sex. But Joe does get Daisy a beautiful play stove and she teaches her to cook. Someone who I know actually was complaining about this, how did Joe dare to buy Daisy that ridiculous stove and minimize her value as a woman? And I'm like, are you realizing how misogynistic you actually sound? That scene shows how Jo herself is growing as a person. She respects Daisy's individuality. For those of you who don't know, Daisy's Meg's daughter. I don't remember Daisy dreaming about living in luxury. She is hardworking and self-reliant. And Jo doesn't expect her to be a tomboy the way she was. And why should she be? The idea that all feminists are tomboys, which is what a lot of women filmmakers seem to think. That kind of belief, it's only going to harm the feminist movement. And most women are not tomboys, so it's already incredibly unrealistic. In Joe's Boys, there is a scene where Joe actually lectures to young men who are objectifying some of the female students in the campus. So Joe went from a person who had difficulties to judge a young man's behavior, harassing behavior because of their own masculine trajectory, to someone who actually questioned that type of behavior. I wish more people would speak about this. It is important. Women can be misogynistic towards other women, and they can grow out of it. This is a quote from Okio, who left this comment to the Louisa May Alcott group. If there is ever to be any proper justice for Amy, there has to be an adaptation which shows that it was completely Jo's fault that she did not get to go to Europe and Amy did. Every single adaptation that I have seen thus so far, Jo being completely robbed of her trip by Aunt March, despite her promise that she can go, and that just gives the viewer another reason to dislike Amy, as if she wasn't dealing with enough criticism from her behavior when she was 12 years old. It would also be a good opportunity for an adaptation to show Jo's human faults, and not to show her as some glorified feminist icon, as it is often the case. I am going to chime in to Nina and completely agree that it's about high time an adaptation focuses on Larry and his arc, which is practically non-existing in most if not all adaptations. I think that's the only way Amy and Laurie will ever make complete sense. While I appreciate Gerwig's attempt to flesh out Amy, I could not for the life of me figure out why she had any reason to like him in the end. Thank you so much for listening. Like, comment and share. Hit the bell button and subscribe to Small Umbrella in the Rain to learn more about Little Woman. Check out the full Q&A episode where my amazing followers asked me very clever questions about Louisa May Alcott. Take care and make good choices.